foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. If you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussion today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbance.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Prajwal, and we will begin the session now. So today we are planning to discuss a very important poem from Rigveda Samhita. Rigveda is the most ancient recorded document of spirituality and philosophy in human history. Goes back to at least 3rd or 4th millennium BC. There are different conflicting opinions about its antiquity, but that's not the subject of discussion right now in front of us. So I have already given a separate talk on Rigveda Samhita, which you can find in the archives, but it's a very brief introduction of Rigveda Samhita as a basic text. But today we are going to discuss one of the two most prominent and profound hymns of Rigveda Samhita. There are two well-known hymns in Rigveda Samhita. I would say what is a hymn? It's called Suktam in Sanskrit. So the entire Rigveda Samhita is divided into 10 separate sections called mandalas. This is one way of counting. In the more traditional way of counting is in terms of ashtaka, which is a slightly more complicated and more confined to certain parts of India, including the place I am coming from. But anyway, this particular division is based on the popular printed available published books called a mandala. Mandala means a section. So Rigveda Samhita is divided into 10 mandalas. Each mandala has got a number of hymns. A hymn has got several verses, each verse with 4 lines in different meters. So, and each verse is called a rik. So rik means actually the basic unit of Rigveda is a rik. So the basic unit. So in other words, of course, a single verse itself can have more than one rik. So we are now going to discuss the 90th Suktam of Rigveda Samhita. It is the 90th Suktam in Rigveda, and it appears as 19th Khanda, 6th Suktam in Atharvaveda. So one speciality of what we are going to discuss is called Purusha Suktam. So Purusha means not, if you look at the Monier Williams or Apte's dictionaries or anywhere, you find Purusha means a male human being. That's one meaning. But that is not the philosophical or scriptural meaning of Purusha. Purusha, in short, in plain English, it means one supreme reality which remains enshrined within the human system. So it's Atman. So Puri Seti iti Purushaka. Purnatvat Purushaka. There are two definitions that is found in Shankaracharya's commentaries. Innumerable definitions are there. So one is Purishetedi Purushaka. Puri means a city. That's a popular meaning in Sanskrit lexicon. Puri means a city. Now, this body is often characterized as a city with 9 gates opening to the outside world. So, what are the 9 gates? You can see 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, mouth, 2 ears, and 2 other openings in the lower part of the human body structure. So, these are the 9 openings. So, this human body is compared to a city with 9 gates opening to the outside. So, Navadware Pure Dehi, Naiva Kurvanna Karen, you find in Gita, Navadware Pure. In the city with 9 doors, Dwara means doors. So, the Atman, the Jivatma, the individual soul, is staying, residing in this human body system, which is a city with 9 gates. So, what does it mean, Purisheteti Purushaka? So, somebody or something which is residing within, which is sleeping, which is existing within the body. So, that should be other than the body. So, when somebody tells you you are staying in a room, you are staying in a house, it means you are certainly different from the house, the building, the structure within which you are residing. So, your separateness from the house in which you are living, and the house, it's the fact that it is distinct from the one who is residing within. So, like that, Purusha is somebody or something which is residing within the human body, which has got 9 gates, which is Atman, which is other than body. So, Sharirindriya Vetiriktam Atma, you find it in the Bhashya literatures. Sharirindriya Vetiriktam. Vetiriktam means distinct and different, separated from the body, senses, mind complex. So, that is the meaning of Purusha. And other one is Purnatvat Purushaka. Purna means complete, full, by itself intrinsically complete and perfect and full. So, this Atman is all pervading, it is immanent, residing within everything, it is also transcendental. So, all these are implied when you use the word Purusha. The word Purusha in any dictionary, as I mentioned earlier, it means, Purusha means a male person. So, Purusha and Stri is a female person. That is only very, very elementary meaning. That's the meaning that you find in literature, in Sanskrit dramas or novels. There's a novel in Sanskrit, I mean, I don't know how many of you remember, the most ancient novel, creative fiction, in the form of a novel, was written in Sanskrit that belongs to between 4th and 6th century BC, called, it is Mrit Shakatigam, by a writer called Sudraka. So it is in a way you can say it is play and novel combined together. So there are interesting characters in that, policeman, thief, king, trials, all you find in this 4th century, between 4th and 6th century BC, that particular creative fiction. So Suktam means a hymn. So, and this Purusha Suktam is found in all the 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. It is one of the very few Suktams which is found uniformly in all the 4 Vedas. It is, as I mentioned, it is 90th Sutta of the Rig Veda Samhita. Just 1 minute. So, and it is the 19th kanda, because the counting of the structure of the book, Atharva Veda is different. 19th kanda and 6th sutra. It is found as the 31st chapter in Yajurveda. And the Samaveda, which is more in the form of a poetry or music, it's a musical structure. It is scattered in many, many places, but not in the compact form. So, in a way, what is Purusha? The universal vision. You can see, if you remember the Gita lectures, we discussed this Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga, the Gita, means the universal vision of the Supreme Reality, the divine, that is the embodiment of everything, the vision of one in many and many in one, the supreme form which the Lord revealed to Arjuna. You can find, in you I see creation of all gods and goddesses, the entire universe with all the multiple creations emerging, existing and dissolving in you. I find all this. You find Arjuna is addressing Lord Krishna. So one important aspect of these Veda mantras, Vedic mantras, it has got three important aspects. One is Rishi, Chandas and Devata. So you often find, before those of you who, at least some of you who are reciting Vedic mantras in the form of Gayatri or in the form of Sandhya Vandana, means morning and evening, you perform some rituals and prayers, Vedic prayers you call it. So before you actually chant these Vedic mantras, you remember, you pay tributes, you pay obeisance, you show your indebtedness to the great sages of the past and the gods and goddesses to whom these prayers are addressed. And also you remember the particular meter in which that mantra is recited. It's called Rishi, Chanda, Chandas we call, and Devata. So Rishi means the sage, a particular saint or sage to whom this mantra was originally revealed. So for example, Vishwamitra is the Rishi, the sage associated with Gayatri mantra. Like that, you can find just an example. And Gayatri itself is the name of the meter in which Gayatri mantra is constructed, 24 letters. And Surya Savita means the sun god, so to speak, is the deity. So each mantra has got these components. I mean Rishi, Chandas and Gayatri. And each of these four Vedas will be represented in a Vedic ritual by one prominent priest who must be a master of that particular Vedas and also who must be familiar with the performance of all rituals performed according to the tradition of the specific mantra. Rigveda, for example, the priest who represents Rigveda in a Vedic ritual is called Hota. And the priest who represents Yajurveda is called Adharyu, and the priest who participates, who represents Samaveda is called Udgata, means you recite, you sing loudly, that's the meaning of it. And Atharva Veda is called Brahman. So all these four Vedas will be represented in a Vedic ritual. Some of these aspects are being discussed somewhat elaborately at the beginning of this series, and also when I was discussing all the four Vedas in some other sessions, which already you can find on YouTube. Major Veda, Rigveda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda, we give separate lectures, introductory lectures on each of the four Vedas. Now, of course, there's one important thing. How do you know the meanings of the Vedas? That's one important question. something that many people don't really understand is, the language of the Vedas, especially your Rig Veda, Samhita, is one of the oldest form of Sanskrit language. It is very irregular. It doesn't follow a specific pattern of grammatical rules and syntax and so on. Today, when you speak Sanskrit or when you write Sanskrit, you are following the grammatical rules laid down by a great man in the 9th century BC, and his name was Ashpanini, and this book that he wrote, which the Bible of Sanskrit grammar, is called Ashtadhyayi. The book is with 8 chapters. Now that was the time when Sanskrit grammar, syntax, and rules of Sanskrit grammar and syntax were laid down once for all. So today also you follow the same pattern. I am a student of philology and linguistics in the Western tradition. The first attempt to define the universal pattern of English pronunciation was done by Daniel Jones, who wrote English Pronouncing Dictionary and English Pronunciation in the 1920s and 30s by Daniel Jones and his commentator called A.G. Jimson. That is in 20th century. And as for American English, the credit goes to great linguists of our own times, Chomsky and others. But the Sanskrit language, the pronunciation, that's the received pronunciation, called RP in British English. Bobby Coleman can testify. It was laid down in the first half of 20th century and Sanskrit in 9th century BC. So today, if you are reading Sanskrit, any Sanskrit book that's written in our own times, it follows the grammatical rules of Panini, who lived in 9th century BC. It's an interesting thing. So the first attempt to write some kind of a lexicon or dictionary of Vedic Sanskrit was done by a great man called Yaska. More is a work in etymology. He did not actually write a dictionary per se. Dictionary as we understand in today's terms. He wrote a book which can be called something like a book on etymology and treasures. It's called Yaska's Nirukta. In which book he gives, for example, Devo Danadva, Jyotanadva, Deepanadva, Dusthanova Bhavatiti. To give an example. Deva. What does Deva mean? Deva, if the dictionary meaning will be God. But remember, Deva doesn't mean God with capital letter G. The anthropomorphic created God of Abrahamic religions and popular Hinduism. No, that's not the meaning. It roughly corresponds to what we call angels in Christian theology. When Jesus Christ was born, some angels were singing in that field. So angels were singing, you find. So more like an angel. So what is the meaning of Deva? So Deva is called Deva because Deva lives in the celestial regions. Devo Dusthanova. Danadva, he fulfills your desires. When you pray for something, he answers your prayers. And also, he will kindle the light of knowledge in your heart when you pray to him. So these are the possible implications of the word Deva. This is how Yaska goes about explaining. Only a very small, limited number of words that he himself chose at random from Rig Veda Samhita. Rig Veda Samhita has got, remember, more than 1,000 suktas, close to 11,000 rigs, mantras. So it's a huge book. So Yaska just wrote just a few hundreds at random, and he wrote a book called Yaska's Nirupta. In fact, there is a whole school of Vedic interpreters in ancient times. It's called Nairuptikaha, I mean those who follow the Vedic etymology, the Vedic interpretation, the hermeneutics, according to traditions laid out by Yaska. So Yaska himself says, Sashakrita dharman rishayo babhuvuhu te asakshakrita dharmabhya upadeshaya gayanta mantran sampraptuhu. What it means is, the great sages in ancient times who realized the meaning of the origin and the existence and dissolution of the entire creation through their meditation, those who realize the truth of existence through meditation, they sang for the sake of those for the benefit of those who could not realize the supreme truth. For their sake, to make them understand the meaning of existence, they sang these songs. This is what Yaska says. So Yaska seems to have had a very high sense of pride in himself, let's say. It is meant for those who could not realize the truth. For that, these sages composed these songs. This is what you find Veda Samhita. Anyway, you can give credit to all of them, because in terms of this, the profoundness of the spiritual, philosophical outlook. You know why it's profound? If you read the Veda, even translation, anyone who is not familiar with Sanskrit or not familiar with the traditional learning of Vedas, especially those who are in English-speaking world, I can only recommend a very famous book by Raymond Panikkar, who wrote this well-known book, Vedic Experience. It is called, in fact, he was not satisfied with just giving an English. So he wrote a Mantra Manjari, he called it. So he was contented, he felt a kind of inner satisfaction only when he coined, not coined, it's a Sanskrit word, Mantra Manjari. So, which he wrote, which is a very famous book, is called Vedic Experience, Raymond Panikkar, who has studied the Vedas, who dedicates his entire life to the comparative study of Christianity, Christian mysticism and Hindu mysticism, and also the study of the Vedas. He was I think he was of mixed parentage, part Indian and part Spanish. So he get his name, Raymond Panikkar. Very famous, most celebrated name. The point is, the struggle that he underwent and the care he took to do justice while putting these ancient ideas from Vedic literature into modern English. Of course, you cannot really translate even a classical book on philosophy into another language without losing some of its original charm and meaning. But if you translate an ancient work, mystical work, a work of poetry into modern language, it is a really praiseworthy effort, and we can remember him as the one who reached the highest level of fulfillment in this speech. So he also brought in the poetic charm while writing this book. It's called Mantra Manjari or Vedic Experience. Now, if you look at the Purusha Suktam, it doesn't begin with the mantra proper. It begins with what we call Shanti Mantra. It's kind of invocation. There are any number of Shanti Mantras. All these Shanti Mantras are scattered all over the four Vedas. So if you take any of these well-known Upanishads, Isa, Kena, Kata, Prasna, Mundaga, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitireya, Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka, Kaushitaki, Kaivalya, any of these Upanishads if you take, all these Upanishads begin with an invocation. The invocation is called Shanti Mantra. So it ends with the Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That's how it ends. So Shanti Mantra. Peace invocation, as is frequently called in English. So the Shanti Mantra for each of these Upanishads could be different. So Shanti Mantras for a few Upanishads which belong to the same Vedic tradition could be identical or similar, but Shanti Mantra for hymns for Upanishads from another Upanishad, another Vedic tradition could be different. So the Shanti Mantra for this particular Suktam, it's called Purusha Suktam, it is something like this. So I am not going to recite or chant as we do. If you, we have already chanted, you can see this in our system. You know, there are different ways of chanting, and what we normally follow, I mean, the Ramakrishna mission may not be exactly the most ancient form of chants, because that is preserved in certain small places. Those of you who want to get a little bit of an idea of the most ancient form of Vedic chant, I can only recommend you perhaps, you know, the beginning of the Sanskrit movie Adi Shankaracharya. It's a Sanskrit movie of all, not modern movie. So we can see a sample of the most ancient form. It means which remains untouched by any efforts to make it more musical, because Rigveda is not entirely all about music. So if you want to, if you recite it with the help of harmonium and the orchestra, actually you'll be doing something much more cruel than violating the rules of Queen's English in America, you know. So one should never attempt to do that, remember. So the point is, one should not overdo trying to make Vedic chanting musical, because you will be moving far away from the original style of the Vedic sages. So it is not meant to be music per se, but there is, of course, a great spiritual music all through. Remember, that's all. So the Shanti Mantra, this one is, it begins Tat Sayura Vrini Mahe. That there are different statements here. So one is this, the first part is Tat Sayyohu Avrini Mahe, means what it means. So Tat Sham. Sham actually means something that helps you. It is called Mangala Karana, means Praptanam Rogadinam Upashamana Karana, means it is something that brings auspiciousness in your life, prosperity for those who are poor, knowledge for those who are looking for knowledge, fulfillment and satisfaction and contentment for those who are looking for contentment. So anything that brings auspiciousness. So Sham Karoti Iti Shankara. Shankara itself means somebody who brings auspiciousness, good prosperity in your life. So the point is, the meaning is, let us enjoy prosperity and auspiciousness in the present, in the future, and in the past. So actually it's enough, but they always include, you know, the implication is only in the present and in future, but Vedic interpretation include the past also, because you have done something inauspicious in the past and you are suffering on account of that. Let that suffering also be eradicated by this prayer. So it's a prayer to the Almighty God, which is manifesting in the form of different deities, different divine beings everywhere. So let all of us enjoy happiness and auspiciousness by the grace of the Lord. in the simple plain English. Gatum yajnaya. Now, gatum means we are actually, we are praying for bringing, for enjoying auspiciousness in the performance of our yajna. Yajna means different things. Yajna can, in its simplest implication, it means a Vedic ritual. In its more subtle philosophical implication, it means any auspicious effort, any noble action, any disinterested action, any deed or word or thought that you do without any selfish motive, it can be called yajna. These are all philosophical, you know. So you see, yajno vai seshtatamam karma, this is one meaning. I mean, any noble act is yajna. And also, it also means a ritual. Devadodeshena dravyasya tyagaha yajna. In different interpretative works of Vedic tradition, Katyayana Sutra Vyakhya and in the Vajasini Samhita, in all many on the commentaries you find different meanings. One is a kind of ritual that you perform to please gods and goddesses. Remember, you can see the polytheism, mean belief and worship of different deities. And also monotheism, in the belief in one supreme deity. And monism, a belief that the highest idea of God is one all-pervading, immanent, divine reality. All these you find in each of these Shanti Mantras. On the one hand, you find, let us get plenty of wealth, plenty of money, and lot of good people around, good family. So all these ordinary, very empirical, very worldly desires are placed before different deities, and the sage is praying for the fulfillment. Remember, all the mantras are not Advaitic or reflective of the highest mystical ideas, not at all. There are, some of them are very, very worldly desires are placed before deity. That also you find in the Vedic mantras. Anyway, that's a different matter. So, Gatum Yajnaya, we are singing this hymn, these verses for pleasing different deities, different gods and goddesses, different manifestations of the divine spirit, which is found everywhere. Then Gatum Yajnapatiye, Yajnapatiye Gatum. Yajnapati. Yajnapati means, it's very interesting. So these are, if you look at the chanting style that you find in the Bay Area, it's very easy. Tachayoravrimahe Gatum Yajnaya Gatum Yajnapataye. This is one style that you find very common everywhere, which is the most popular and most commonly, frequently found style, which you may be, some of you may be familiar. If you go to these temples, you can find. So, Gadam Yajnapataye. So, this is only Shanti Mantra invocation. But I want to explain the Shanti Mantra as thoroughly as time permits, because that will be a good beginning for introduction of this very, very important hymn. And remember, these are some of the most important mantras found in entire Veda Samhita. Two mantras which I'm planning to introduce. One is Purusha Suktam, the other one is Srishti Suktam or Nasadiya Suktam, which may be even more philosophical but much shorter, which we'll discuss later. It also comes in the 10th mandala, Nasadiya Suktam, Nasadasit, no Sadasit. Na asadasit, no sat asit. I mean, in the beginning, there was neither existence, nor non-existence, nor anything that can be combined together. There was something which defines all human efforts to describe and explain. That is the supreme reality from which everything in this world has emerged. So in fact it is much more profound, but it is shorter. This is a little longer than what we are discussing now. 16 mantras you find. And this is the invocation. So Gadum Yajnapati. So Yajnapati literally means Yajnanam Padi. Padi means the Lord, the overlord, the one who supervises everything. So here Yajnapati means, it means called Yajamana, that's a technical word. So all the Vedic rituals were performed by priests for the prosperity of another person, mostly the king of the locality. So all these priests used to come together and perform these Vedic rituals, and the beneficiary of these performance of rituals was very often the king, or maybe a rich person who may not be proficient in performing these rituals himself. So he collects a lot of materials, human resources. It's a very expensive project, and he brings all these priests of different Vedic traditions, and he arranges this Vedic ritual. So let that Yajamana means the one for whose benefit, who is the enjoyer of the fruits or the results, the benefits of the performance of this Vedic ritual. That is Yajamana. For his auspiciousness also we are singing, we are praying, we are singing these divine songs in praise of the different deities. Deities mean it could be any of the deities. Vedic deities could be, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Agni, Paumana, Soma, Surya, and so on. You find a number of deities. Very similar. In some ways, if you look at the translations, English translations of Rigveda Samhita, and if you read Homer's Iliad, you can see many similarities. Very often Indra appears to be somebody like a Jupiter. All these Greek gods and goddesses also took sides in the battle, in Trojan War. Some helped the Trojans, and some others helped the Greeks. And they also had their own jealousies and problems and fighting and quarreling and shouting. All you find of different Vedic deities also. Remember, if you look at the Vedic deities, they were not necessarily very spiritual. That is another important point I want to bring home. The Vedic deities were great, divine, celestial beings, but they were not necessarily very spiritual. They were certainly not bad people. Angel Devas themselves stood for the benefit, goodness, for the prosperity of everyone. But they were not like a Buddha or a Sri Ramakrishna or a Christ. They were not necessarily spiritually very enlightened, not all of them. So very often you find many similarities between these Vedic deities and also the Greek gods who took part, taking sides in the Trojan War, some supporting the Trojans, some others supporting the Greeks, you can find. So Gadum Yajnapati, for the benefit, for the auspiciousness, for the prosperity of Yajnapati, Yajamana, for whose sake this ritual is being performed, for his prosperity also we are singing, we are praying. Again, Daivi Sostihi Astu Naha. Sosti Astu Naha. Daivi Sostirastu Naha. Again, another one is say, and also let us all get the blessings of all these deities. Daivi Sostirastu Naha. So Naha Sostihi Astu. Naha means in modern Sanskrit means asmakam, for us. Sosti means auspiciousness, peace, happiness, prosperity. Many of you may not know that. In fact, swastika itself was a universal symbol of peace, prosperity, happiness, human brotherhood, universal goods. That is the real meaning of the word swasti. This, okay, to what extent it was hijacked and got a diabolical interpretation, meaning that's part of one of the darkest chapters of the history of modern civilization, which is something which I don't want to go into. But we should remember this swasti. Swasti means prosperity, happiness, joy. It is an important symbol of Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, many of the ancient traditions. And there are scholars who extend this interpretation further. They say some kind of this symbol of auspiciousness and universal brotherhood and prosperity was also found in non-Christian, pre-Christian religions and traditions of Western world. So that's a different subject. So here means Naha, Devi Sustirastu. Let all of us be blessed by peace and happiness and prosperity and universal brotherhood and auspiciousness by the grace of different deities, devas, Devi Sustirastu. And again, this continues, Swasti Manushebhyaha. Let there be, let all human beings enjoy Swasti. So what it means? Let the whole human family, human society have the good luck to enjoy prosperity, peace and happiness. It's an important thing to remember. I think whenever you come across people who have very wrong interpretation, which is of very recent origin, which is a very unfortunate history, which is actually terrible even to think of that. So the word swasti means peace, auspiciousness, prosperity, universal brotherhood, all as good and auspicious and spiritual for the entire humanity. That's the meaning of swasti. So even in the ancient traditions, when in Hindu culture, to some extent Buddhist culture also, when you pay your respect to your teacher or maybe to your grandfather or your father or parents or somebody who's elderly in your family and who is worthy of respect because he is or she is your teacher, or you have some respectful relationship with somebody, then when you do namaste and the other person may say Sustirastu, let there be peace and prosperity in you, let you be blessed by peace and prosperity. So this is a real, very, very simple. You can also find this in some of the ancient plays and dramas, or Sanskrit dramas and plays you find. So Swastihi Manushebhyaha Udam Jigadu Bheshajam. That's an interesting thing. Okay. Bheshajam, Bheshajam literally stands for medicinal herbs that nature gives to human society. So Udam Jigadu Bheshajam means let the medicinal plants sprout everywhere, grow everywhere, and let there be remedial medicinal plants everywhere, sprouting everywhere, growing everywhere, producing the fruits and results and helping humanity, the afflicted sections of humanity everywhere. This is another prayer. So Udam Jigadu Bheshajam. So you can find Udam Jigadu Bheshajam. This is a modern way of chanting which is more common, which you may be more familiar with. Shamno Astu Dipate. So Dipata means the bipeds, human beings, and also maybe there are other animals walk and live on two legs. Let them also enjoy Sham, means Swasti, means prosperity, auspiciousness, peace and happiness everywhere. So Shamno Astu Dvipade. Dvipade Shamno Astu. So let prosperity and happiness come to all of us, and also to all those who are bipeds, human beings mostly. Some Chaduspade, and also there are quadrupeds, animals, horses walk on four legs. Let these animals also be blessed with prosperity, happiness, and peace and joy everywhere. And Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So these are uttered three times. Means three prayers for the eradication of three possible types of afflictions. What are they? For example, there are some afflictions like disease, and there are some afflictions that are beyond our direct control. When you see, for example, lightning, earthquakes, and there are some afflictions, sometimes thieves breaking into your homes. So some afflictions that link to our own physical body. So Adhyatmika, the Adi Bhaudika and Adi Devika, earthquakes, lightning, floods. So they are caused not directly by human beings. Of course, today we can say there is a human element in causing many of these tragedies in modern times, but traditionally, let's say. And also, sometimes when you walk in the forest, sometimes you may be attacked by an animal, a wild animal. These are some. So all these are some afflictions, different kinds of afflictions. So the Vedic sages are praying for freedom, for remedy for all diseases. That's why udam jigadu bheshajam udam jigadu. Let all the medicinal plants sprout everywhere and grow higher and higher, and producing plants for the benefit of humanity. So also let there be freedom from all possible afflictions, both human afflictions caused by nature, and all. This is a kind of Shanti is repeated 3 times. So this is the Shanti mantra. Now after this, I would like to take up some of the some aspects linked to this suktam itself. So I would like to be as loyal to the traditional interpretation as possible. I would like to begin my description, explanation of the mantras based on the most traditional commentary, that is Sayana's commentary. Remember, Sayana's commentary is not the first commentary. Sayana lived somewhere in the 13th, 14th century. Before that, there were a number of commentators in Vedic tradition, Bhaskara, Mahidhara, and so on. Innumerable commentaries are found. Most of those commentaries did not cover the entire text of Rigveda Samhita. It was Swayana who, once for all, as a single individual, wrote commentaries on all the 4 Veda Samhitas, the mean Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda and Atharva Veda. And now remember, when we are talking about Sayana's commentary, we are primarily talking about commentaries on those sections of the Vedic literature other than the Upanishads. Because Upanishads were already interpreted extensively, very philosophically, and in a most authentic language by Shankaracharya, almost 400 years before Sayana. Actually, Sayana himself was a close follower of Shankaracharya's tradition. He was closely connected to Sringeri Math tradition, which in fact Sayana and Vidyaranya, who was himself a great Vedantic scholar who wrote well-known books in the Vivarana tradition, and also great works like Panchadasi, which are important, authentic introductory works on Advaita Siddhanta, Advaita Vedanta. So Sayana's commentary is even now the most popular. When you talk about Vedic commentaries, we are talking about Sayana. I mean, it has become so very popular and authentic. Now, what does Sayana say about this comment, about these mantras? So it begins with this Sahasra Sisha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapad Sabhumim Vishwado Vrutva, mean it is Avrutva Atyadishat Dishangulam. This is how the mantra begins. Sahasra Sisha Purusha. So Purusha is Sahasra Sisha. Sahasra, if you look at the dictionary, it means 1000. But Sahasra, in Vedic terminology, in Vedantic terminology, in philosophic terminology, Sahasra means, in the language of the traditional commentators, Asankhya means infinite in number, numberless, innumerable, beyond counting. That's the meaning of Sahasra. So this Purusha, so what is Purusha as we understand now? Purusha means the divine in its most sublime, in its most universal dimension. God, in its, to be specific, in the Advaitic sense, is one attributeless, eternal, immortal, universal, all-pervading reality. So that's why the God, Atman, God or Atman, Atman is called Purusha, because Purusha is that divine spark, Atman, that is residing in all beings, in all body structures, which other than the body, Dehantara Vediriktam, it is distinct and different from body and senses, and at the same time, it is residing within it. It is the life of everything, but it's not the body or mind or intellect. So that's the meaning of Purusha. And this Purusha is Sahasra Sisha. So if you read an English translation, say 1,000-headed, that is absolutely terrible. It doesn't mean Sahasra, 1,000-headed. So if you want to express a mystical idea in the form of a literary work, then what happens, very often you will kill the mystical element in that poetical work, because a poet in Sanskrit called Kavi, Kavihi Mantra Drashta. So who is a poet? A poet is one who looks far into something and deep into something, and also who gets a comprehensive vision of everything. In simple language, a man like William Wordsworth, he'll stay living in Lake District or whatever. I'm just giving an example in Western world for the benefit. I'm telling many of you. Of course, nowadays, to talk about Wordsworth in modern 21st century America is absolutely unacceptable, according to many of our great technocrats. But anyway, let us commit that terrible crime of referring to the great Wordsworth, the Victorian poet, to a tech of such a society, whatever it is. So, William Wordsworth, living in a beautiful island, or let us say coming closer to our own home, let us say this Emerson, or let's say Whitman or Thoreau walking through this forest and looking at the sky or the trees or the plants and seeing a meaning and relevance and a sense in a leaf, in a plant or a flower, which a botanist may not associate with. He is looking deeper into the flower. And this is a simple poet, ordinary poet. Now a mantra drashta, that's the meaning of kavi or poet in Sanskrit. A great sage of spiritual illumination who looks at the entire creation deeper into everything and in a more comprehensive manner, seeing different meaning, higher implications in the beauty of sky, rivers, mountains and valleys. So if you try to translate the original language of a mystical poetry into a classic literary work, maybe you may lose the mystical implications of it. So Purusha, of course we know it's not a male human being, it is the all-pervading divine spark present in everything and present everywhere. And Sahasra Sisha means not 1,000-headed. It means that which is present everywhere. It's an implication of the all-pervading nature of the divine. Sahasra. Sahasra means infinite. The all-pervading nature. That's the meaning of Sahasra. Anantaihi Sishaihi Uktaha. That way Sayana says. Anantaihi Sishaihi Uktaha means. Ananta means infinite number. You cannot count. Is all pervading. So this Purusha, this all pervading reality is endowed with infinite number of heads, means it is present everywhere. Instead of saying a simple straightforward man may say it is present everywhere. But a poet will say it is infinite in scope. It has got infinite number of heads. Same it continues, Sahasra Purusha. Sahasraksha means, again, Sahasra means Ananta, Asankhya, infinite number. Sahasraksha means not 1,000-eyed, that's a literal translation. It means it's seeing everything, its presence is everywhere. So Sahasraksha, Sahasrapad. So it has 1,000 legs. What it means? It is present everywhere. So the all-pervading nature or the universal spirit is expressed by saying that it has got 1,000 heads, 1,000 feet and 1,000 eyes and so on. So this is the language of a mystic, which is far beyond reach of a botanist or even an ordinary literary person. That's the difference. So we will continue in the next session. You are most welcome with questions. Most welcome. Thank you. I know we are beginning. This is a very, very important class in many ways because this mystical poetry is not frequently understood. There are people who chant with great reverence and respect and sacredness, but if we can chant this with the full understanding, some understanding of the mystical implications of what we are chanting, it will be wonderful. Thank you. Most welcome. Questions?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
David, would you please ask your question first?
Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
The question I have is, you said that all these writings are approximations, and yet when we look at the Mahavakyas, or like when Sri Ramakrishna teaches that Rama and his name are different,
Yeah.
how does one to understand those two juxtapositions?
Rama and his name are non-different.
Correct. When it seems that Sri Ramakrishna is saying that the name is God.
Yeah.
Or the great saying that the Mahavakyas seem to have more to them than just an abstract sort of approximation.
True. You know, that's true. Actually, the extent of the meaning that we associate with any mantra, any statement, depends not just on the word itself, but also with what attitude, with what level of spiritual fitness we are reading. This is an important thing. So often we can imbibe only that much of meaning for which we are spiritually and intellectually ready for. So I often give the example, I cannot give a better example. See, Max Muller, he started he started his work, study the Vedas and editing and all that. He didn't have what a great work he'll be remembered for when he actually took up the job. And according to many traditions, he was commissioned by the church to study and publish, so that once this Veda is published, people will understand what an absolute trash, what absolute gibberish the Vedas are. And when Max Muller actually started, he never looked back. And then he meets Swami Vivekananda in Oxford. And then Swami Vivekananda asked him, he's a great man, he's staying with his wife, and Swamiji compares them with Vasishtha and Arundhati, the ancient Vedic sages. And when Swami Vivekananda asked him, have you gone to India? And Max Muller's reply was, no, if I go, you have to bury me there. That was his response. And Paul Deussen was one who went to India. Remember, if you look at some of the some of the statements in the comment section of my classes on Veda, there are people who write all kinds of absolute trash about Max Muller, because they only understand him on the basis of what intention he had when he actually started the work. But they have no idea of what he became eventually when he started the journey through the Vedas. He eventually himself became a rishi. And somebody who can be compared to Vasishtha by a man like Vivekananda, he must have been certainly a great man, you remember. So this is often there were many comments from many people who wrote comments on below the comments, the class when I gave the classes on Veda, when I referred to Max Muller. They were writing because they have absolutely no idea, no sense of history. Max Muller may not have started with a good intention, but eventually he wrote a work on the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, the first great book written in Western world. And he was the man whom Vivekananda compared to Vasishtha, who was the teacher of Rama. And so remember, what I mean to say, when Max Muller actually started reading, he never looked back. He himself eventually became a rishi. So it depends upon with what mind, with what attitude we approach a great work. This is very important, remember. With what mind. And sometimes when we start reading a great work like the Vedas, sometimes, there may be a huge stock of great karmas and samskaras in our mental system coming from previous life cycles. We may suddenly manifest themselves and they take a different world. Max Muller never had a normal life. He and his wife are devoted exclusively for the preservation of Vedic culture. Just imagine that. This happened not just one person. Paul Deussen, living in New York, he read something Ramana Maharshi, and that's the beginning of a new life. So you can imagine what happened to him, in what way he was different. This doesn't happen to people who are very often living 50 miles away from Tiruvannamalai, where Ramana Maharshi lived. You go and ask people within 100 miles, 50 miles around Tiruvannamalai, what they think of Ramana Maharshi. Do you think every single person is a devotee? Like Paul Brandon, who lived in New York. So you can imagine. So all depends upon our own spiritual and mental fitness. That is true. That is true in understanding any great work. We can only imbibe what we are ready to imbibe. It's an important thing. And this it defies all the limitations of boundaries of culture, race, nation, nationality, whatever it is. With great universal spiritual ideas, just captivate you, capture your mind, and it doesn't ask your permission before doing that. This is what happened. So it's a natural process. So to what extent we are ready? To that extent we imbibe great ideas from great books, whether Vedas or else, anything else. So, okay, then.
Ranji, you're next.
Yeah.
Namaste, Swamiji. I have a question. So when you said Purusha, so in the Indian philosophy often Purusha and Prakriti are talked about.
Oh yeah,
So in context,
that is true. So the same word can mean different things in different systems of philosophy. In Sankhya system, for example, Purusha has a different meaning. In Sankhya system, Purusha is one of the two fundamental categories, eternal categories, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is effulgent, but it is inactive. Prakriti is non-effulgent, but it is the genesis, the origin of the whole evolution. From Prakriti, Mahatattva, or Mahatattva, three ahangaras, Sattvika ahangara, Tamasika ahangara, Rajasika ahangara. From these three ahangaras, mind, senses of perception, senses of action. From Tamasika ahangara, the Pancha Mahabhutas, Pancha Tanmatras. From Pancha Tanmatras, Pancha Mahabhutas, the entire universe, 23 evolutes, they all emerge from Prakriti. So, Prakriti is the root of the whole creation according to Sankhya system. Purusha is the opposite of Prakriti. Actually, the purpose of Yoga Shastra is to regain your identity with Purusha. For some reason, you have identified yourself with Prakriti, which is not real identity. So, the whole evolution begins. And when you practice yoga through Chitta Vritti Nirodha, eventually you get back to, it's called, Pradiprasava, reverse evolution. And when you reach, then you understand that your true identity is Purusha. So remember, Sankhya system is dualistic. And Sankhya system, its conclusion is not very logical. But this analysis of human mind, intellect and senses, everything is very logical. It is accepted by Vedantis also. It is called Samana Siddhanta. So Vedanta accepts many of the teachings from other systems of theistic philosophy, but not the conclusions. It's called Samana Siddhanta. There is an affinity between Sankhya and Vedanta, but there is a clear-cut distinction difference also, because Advaita Vedanta is non-dualistic and Sankhya is primarily dualistic. In Shankaracharya's works, wherever you find Dvaita is referring to Sankhya system, which by implication includes yoga also. So that Purusha should not be confused with the Purusha of Purusha Suktam. Totally different. Okay? Yeah.
Jai Krishna.
Yeah.
Namaste, Swamiji.
Namaste.
So you had mentioned there are 8 Ashtakas, and I had heard about 10 mandalas of Rig Veda before, but not Ashtakas. So, but I also heard like there's a chronological order of the mandalas, like books 6, 3, 7 are like older ones, and 4 and 2 are next, and all those. But when we come to Ashtaka, is it followed only in certain areas versus the mandala, and also from the chronological perspective, does it matter in that sense?
Now, Ashtakas are designed to help in the memorization of Veda mantras. It is primarily, it may make it easier for one to memorize. And also this, you should not imagine that this Rigveda Samhita has got the same identical version followed all over India. Of course, primarily the text is the same, but there are many versions with slight variations from place to place. So the credit goes to the great Indologists, including Indian scholars in 19th century, and also early 20th century, who went to different places all over India and who collected different versions of Rig Veda in different parts of India, and who finally brought out the standardized edition. So, in fact, the whole effort began with Max Muller. So, remember. So, okay. There is sometimes, I want to point out this is a very important thing. There is a tendency among some scholars who don't have a sense of history and much less sense of propriety, who want to dismiss the work of Max Muller as something non-authentic. It is absolutely wrong. Max Muller was the man who is responsible for the popularization of Vedic culture, Vedic tradition in Western world, and even within India among people who did not really care for studying the Vedas. Vedic study was not permitted for everyone. There were a lot of problems, social divisiveness, social injustices, which kept Vedas within the limits of a small section of people. So it was the efforts of great scholars in India and also in Europe who made it possible for people to study, who had access to Vedas. A very important thing. Of course, I should warn you also, there were many efforts made by some missionaries who denigrate the Vedic culture. There was certainly a well-organized effort, but that didn't take them too far, because the antiquity of the Veda, the greatness of Vedic tradition has been well established by the writings of the great historian, United Nations, the United Nations publication and the history series called The Great American. He's an Englishman who came to America, not Toynbee, which is Will Durant, I think. He's a Will Durant, who is the general editor of this well-known book and publication. So you can find many of their great writings, the antiquity and the greatness of Vedic culture. Of course, there is a great difference between the way a traditional Vedic scholar in India perceives the Vedas and the way it is being perceived by great students of Indology or linguistics and philology or philosophy. There will be a difference. That should be there. Actually, the traditional scholar, the Pandit in India, may not care for the sociological, the cultural implications of Vedic literature very frequently. They care only for the traditional rote learning. They sacrifice their whole life to preserve, to study, to preserve, and to work for the preservation of this great culture. They make enormous sacrifices, financial sacrifices. They sacrifice whole life. But without them, Vedas would not have been preserved. Vivekananda says that again and again. But at the same time, in modern times, extending Vedas beyond the limited interpretations of the traditional scholar and give it a sociological, a cultural and civilizational interpretation, reading more meaning in it. For example, Vedas reflect a way of life, certain values which are part of Vedic culture in ancient civilization. Many of these ideas were later brought out and interpreted, focused and emphasized by scholars, modern scholars in India and also their counterparts in Europe primarily. Of course, there was a great man called Fritz Stahl who taught in Berkeley, who wrote the well-known Altar Fire, Agni, 2 volumes. Actually, mostly he worked he was trying to study and emphasize and maybe popularize the ritualistic parts of Vedic culture, not much of its philosophy as such. Okay, thank you.
Please
I
go
think,
ahead.
we are just about 6 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Ranjit has a follow-up question.
I have one more question. So this Sayana Bhashya, is it available in English now?
I don't know if Sayana is being translated into English. but must be Hindi translation. Sayana's commentaries have been translated into many vernacular languages of India, but I have no idea whether translation must be available in English. I do not know, because I'm also cut off from what is happening in that area for some years. Yeah. But there should be commentary. You can search, internet, this internet age, you can easily search for.
Is there a well accepted commentary of Sayana's translation? I mean, is there a well accepted translation of Sayana exists or not? I will search.
Yeah.
Maharaj, you gave a fine example of the literal interpretation of the thousand-headedness and the dangers of missing the poetical language. Does this happen a lot?
Yeah, frequently it happens. If you read just a literal translation of many of these mantras, you can find a whole lot of literature was written denigrating, belittling the Vedic mantras, taking them in the literal sense. So one problem was, these Vedic mantras were studied by rote memorization and were preserved as an oral tradition. Even the meaning, the mystical meaning was transmitted from teachers to student. I can give you one example. There can be no better example. See, of course, I'm not talking about Samhita, I'm talking about the Upanishads here. Upanishads are important, the essence of Vedas. Vedanta, Vedana Mantaha, that's meaning the final word, the essence of it. Anta means the essence or the conclusion. Now, you read the whole 10 Upanishads with Shankaracharya's commentary. Now, all these 10 Upanishads represent collectively the 4 Vedas, Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samveda, Atharvaveda. Now, these mantras, some of these mantras were interpreted by non-Advaitic scholars before Shankaracharya, Mahedra and others. They interpreted only in a very ritualistic sense. The philosophy is exclusively a contribution of Shankaracharya. So, for example, the Mahavakya, just now David was mentioning Mahavakya, Tattwamasi, Aham Brahmasmi. All these Mahavakyas were senseless, useless, worthless words according to the ritualist philosophers. Because any Vedic statement which doesn't include an injunction for the performance of some ritual or other, those statements are only eulogies, just they don't have any profound implication. Amnayasya kriyarthatvad anarthakyam adatarthanam. It's a well-known statement by Mimamsaka, the ritualistic philosophers. Any Vedic mantra, any Vedic statement which doesn't include an injunction, a clear prescription, you should perform this yajna, this ritual. If a mantra, a portion doesn't contain a clear-cut injunction called vidhi, that mantra is not of much significance. Now, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Ayam Atma Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma, all these, they don't have they don't give an injunction for the performance of rituals. So they were interpreted in a very childish, laughable manner by non-Advaitic and ritualistic philosophers who came before Shankara. Shankara took up all these and gave a great philosophical meaning. Aham Brahmasmi implies the ultimate spiritual experience. When you feel the all-pervading divine reality is Brahman, that is your own true identity, Tattwamasi. The truth you are looking for everyone, it is within you. You are the one, not the physical body, not a mind, world, body, intellect complex, but something beyond that. All this actually, it came from Shankaracharya. I am just giving very, very important but small little examples. Brihadaranyaka and Chandogya are very, very extensive Upanishads. So, now, before Shankara, nobody gave this profound philosophical meaning. Another very important thing I want to mention. You have to remember, you'd be surprised, it'd be a total surprise to many Westerners especially. Only a minute, small, tiny, microscopic section of Indian society were even allowed to study the Vedas. Among them, a much smaller section had the right to perform rituals. You can imagine. This is something very interesting. Many people don't know. But Vedas have a philosophical, spiritual implication. It is talking about the universal spiritual oneness, unity and oneness of whole creation. This idea came from Shankaracharya. Before him, Vedas did not have any philosophical, spiritual meaning. This is an important thing to understand. So, today if you go to Himalaya, if you do Rishikesh, you find many people, Westerners, not born Hindus, not even Indians, and wearing these clothes, studying the Vedas, the big Rudraksha, they wear big vibhudis, this sandal paste and these ashes all over the body, long beard, long hair, a go about sitting and meditating, yoga, all that kundalini. You find all this. It's all because of Shankaracharya. Because he was the one who gave a meaning, a philosophical and spiritual meaning to Vedic mantras. 8th century, Mahidhara, Bhaskara, many others, Yaska was the first important effort to give an etymological meaning. That is 6th century BC. Yaska doesn't go that far. It's a small book. Yaska Nirupta is not a very big book, small work. But Shankaracharya comes now, he says this word means this philosophical meaning. See, in modern times, where Shankaracharya left, in modern times you find Swami Vivekananda came. And he gave it another dimension. He took the same thing and he expressed and expounded in modern English, made it the legacy of the whole humanity, which actually it is. It's an important thing to remember. Okay, so thank you for the great questions, because when you ask questions, it gives me a chance to explain and go deeper into the subject. Thank you, Namaskar. We'll continue in next class. Thank you, Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Namaskar.
Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.